All right, Josh Smith here. We're live at my studio again, live from Flat 5. My guest today is a good friend and an unbelievably great musician. He's one of, I think, the preeminent solo guitar players in the world, also one of the preeminent educators, I think, in the world. He's someone I go to when I have questions because I know he'll have a good answer. He's just an amazing player, improviser, and honestly, he's just a great dude. Like, literally, he's a guy you want to talk to and hang out with. I love this guy, and I love his playing, and it's a pleasure to have him here. Give it up, Tim Lerch, everybody.
Oh, thank you, Josh. That's really sweet of you to say. I was thinking about this. You know, we know each other, but I think I've only met you face to face for about 3 minutes, in all of this time.
Yeah.
It's funny how that works. The world is funny that way. But here we are. We're actually face to face once again in a virtual way. So happy to be here, man. It's a great thing that you're doing. I'm a fan of you personally, what you're doing for the guitar, how you play your ass off in a beautiful way, and also what you've done in this quarantine time is profound, man. It really is. Thank you.
Thank you, man. That's really nice of you to say. And you're right, man. It's this guitar world of ours is very small, and it's like even guys I don't know, I'm really one step removed from. I always know somebody who knows like Julian. I didn't know Julian before I interviewed him last week, and it was like I knew one guy who was friends with him. I called him. He knew me. I was shocked. He's like, "Dude, I love your playing. Yes, I would absolutely love to do that." And then that's
Yeah.
it. And now I've literally spoken to Julian almost every day this week. It was like we had instant connection, and that's just
Yeah,
how
I
it
know.
goes in music.
I feel you about that, particularly about Julian. Julian also is a pal of mine relatively recently, and is similar, very, very similar thing. We got to talking, and it was this mutual admiration society. And he's about as big of a guitar nerd as I am, maybe even bigger. And I love him as a person. And so yeah, I'm glad. I was really happy to see that you did an interview with him because he's a treasure. He really is.
Yeah, you're right. He really is. But let's talk about you, man. So I've been starting every interview wanting to know kind of who put the guitar in your hands initially. I'm always fascinated by how it ends up there and also whether you come from a musical family or not. I don't know your answer to this, so I'm very curious. I've made it clear I don't come from a musical family. It's just pretty much happenstance that I ended up with the guitar. It was a random thing my dad decided to do, and he bought this guitar for me. How did it end up for you? How did it end up in your hands?
Interesting story. I'll try and be brief. I don't come from a musical family per se, although there was a piano in the house. My mom played it after dinner, usually gospel church songs in the key of F. I came to find out later was her key. Um, everybody before me, I come from a big Catholic family, so I had two older brothers and two older sisters, and I also have two younger brothers. So there's a big crew of us. My father was not musical at all. He whistled a little phrase kind of over and over and, badly. And he had this one song that he would sing around a corner and under a tree. And that's all he knew. But everybody before me got piano lessons from the nuns at Catholic Church. And for some reason, they stopped with me. I don't know why. Maybe they didn't have the money, or maybe they did. Maybe I said I don't want to, or maybe they something. But they didn't give me piano lessons where at school you would leave class and go have a piano lesson. Um, and I didn't. To this day I don't resent that because none of my other brothers and sisters who had those piano lessons are terribly musical at all, and or even really, So I guess they're all to one extent or another music lovers, but I didn't get that. But my first memory, my very earliest memory, is sitting on the top bunk in in a room full of four bunk beds or two bunk beds, so four beds.
Yeah.
Sitting on the top bunk, listening to a transistor radio. And in 1962, maybe I was born in '59, so I might have been 2 or 3 years old. Climbed up to the top bunk and stole my brother's transistor radio and listened to whatever was on the radio at that time. And that became quite a ritual for me. I just loved listening to the radio. My mom listened to country radio in Sacramento. I was born and raised in a little town near Sacramento called Woodland. There was a radio station called Crack Radio, which is maybe has different connotations now, but it was a country station, and they played, the pop country of the day, which is the good kind of country that I like, not like the stuff that we've had since then. But and I heard that, and I swear to you, Josh, I don't know if I believe in, past lives or any of that kind of stuff, but the thing I imagined, I wanted to have a guitar, and I wanted to do this. I swear, as a 5-year-old kid, I wanted a guitar, and that's what I wanted to do on it. I don't know what that meant.
Do you remember where you even saw the guitar for the first time? Like,
Oh, I suppose. I mean, by about that time, by the time I was born, the family had a black and white TV, and we could watch it for an hour. It got turned off at 7:30, and we all went to bed. But pretty strict regimen there. But I'm sure I saw guitars being played.
yeah,
It was too early for there to be a guitar in church. That
okay,
came a little later. That came right around the time when we had a thing in the Catholic Church called the folk mass. And that was a new development because when I was a little kid, the mass was in Latin,
hmm,
and so to go from there to having guitars strumming away, singing, la-di-da songs was a big leap. But that came later. I really don't know, Josh. I just always had it inside of me to want to play, and there was no support for it. I mean, I didn't even get my first guitar until I bought my own guitar with my paper route money.
really? Okay, so
Yeah,
how old were you then?
I inherited my paper route from my big brother, and started when I was about 10, which was kind of early, but I was doing it kind of under his auspices. And so I think I might have bought a guitar when I was 12.
Wow.
And I remember my dad took me down to Trainum's Music in Woodland, and I picked out an $80 nylon string guitar that I had saved my money for, and immediately that was it.
Man, I can't even imagine like the want so much that you you worked for it and saved up the money at that young age. It's like what choice did you have but you was predetermined you were gonna
No,
love it. And yeah,
no,
yeah, it's
Josh, I
amazing.
got no choice. I got no choice.
Yeah,
I had no choice. And it's been that way. I never had a fallback.
yeah.
I'm not a logical person when it comes to that. I just couldn't get it out of my head. And I could sing a little bit. My very first instrument was a harmonica. I learned how to sing and play "Love Me Do"
Yeah, wow,
on
okay.
with the harmonica lick.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
luckily there was music around the house, and I wasn't prevented from listening to music. In fact, I have a feeling that it was a relief because I wasn't underfoot. I wasn't causing too much trouble. By the time I got into music, then Timmy's in the other room listening to that radio. And
Right.
but oddly, there was I did it. As far as I can tell, I was never discouraged, except for Timmy, stop playing that, you know, or whatever. But I was also never really encouraged. I don't know if that's maybe my family's a little stoic. I mean, I did
Huh.
okay in school, and I had that whole thing, and I was an altar boy and that whole thing. But then the guitar came along, and it kind of you know, slowly replaced sports and
So
that
when
thing.
you
By the
got the
time
guitar, did you teach yourself? Did you have somebody to show you anything? Did you take
yeah,
lessons?
that's a
How,
that's a
how did
good
it get
question.
started?
Um, I I am self-taught, like I think all of us are. and maybe to a greater extent than some of us are. Like I didn't go have a guitar lesson until I was already giving guitar lessons,
Oh, okay.
which is which is kind of weird, right? I bought a
Yeah.
book and I learned how to read a little bit. I probably read about as well then as I do now. But no, I actually learned how to read. But Mel Bay one or whatever, and
Sure.
single notes, and then you steal the kid down the street. You know, you steal the D chord or whatever. And but I can remember, Josh, like I love to play along with the radio. In fact, this may predict some of your future questions, but I mostly just played along with music, but I
Hmm.
never really learned note for note stuff. But I would find like I can remember I was playing this guitar that I bought at my friend David Warren's house, who had a Tisco.
Yeah.
He was a little better than me. He could play 8 chords, and he would play his chords, and I could find 2 notes that worked. Then I'd find 2 more notes that worked, and I'd see this little box coming, and he would play his chords that he knew, and I would noodle my notes that I could play. And it
Yeah.
kind of was. It's always been a little bit like that. I have had some instruction along the way, but it wasn't early on.
Were there a lot of people your age playing around in your neighborhood at that time? Like they would get together, friends like that?
No, no. In fact, there was one girl, maybe 2 years older than me. I think her name was Nancy, and she was a bit of a star because she could play and sing, pretty good. And you'd hear her at you know school or whatever. And
Right.
there was David Warren, who was down the street, and there were a couple other kids that I didn't know very well, who were maybe they were a little rough, and little wilder kids, and then they could play. I remember one guy, Tom Pinkston, had a red Stratocaster looking guitar. I believe now, as I reflect back, it was a Hagstrom, those red Hagstroms. And he could really play. I mean, that guy could, from what I could tell, who knows whether he could play or not, because I'm still just remembering it. But, there were some kids who could play. And by the time I was in junior high and I really got, you know, wanting to be a guitar player, there were guys with bands, but my problem with them is I liked certain things. We'll talk about that, but they all wanted to play, Kiss and Ted Nugent and stuff like that. And I just wasn't into that. So I never really connected with those, you know, 5 or 6 guys who had a band in high school, or junior high.
I can relate to that because, for me, if I was able to find like aged musicians who had put in the amount of effort I had put in at a young age, they were never into what I was into. So
Right.
that's what eventually led to me searching out playing with adults. It was just the
That's what I did.
frustration of not being able to find people my age.
Yeah, I remember going down to the VFW hall and playing with these great guys. This guy named Emmett Pugh. Emmett Pugh played violin with so much distortion on because his amp was an old Gibson EH 150, and he had some sort of early Barkus Berry stuck onto his violin, and he could play swing. These guys were all. I came up. It was sort of the Western swing was influential around Sacramento,
Okay.
and these guys. One of the guys was a rhythm guitar player, and he was the mayor of the town actually. And Emmett Pugh and some guy who I can't vaguely remember, but he played upright bass, and I just remember him making almost no note sounds. It was all just a kind of thumping sound. I couldn't discern any notes. But we would get together, and Emmett was amazing. He was on fire, that guy. And I would just try and play the tunes. When we play Rosetta and Moonglow and Roly Poly and Take Me Back to Tulsa and all that kind of stuff. And so they didn't teach me so much, but they encouraged. That was the first time I ever uh, was around people who could play a whole song all the way through, and they weren't trying to copy a record or anything.
Right. And what about in school? Was there any music in school for
Yeah.
you?
By the time I got to high school, I guess during that time, high school was 10th grade because junior high was eighth and ninth as a separate area in a separate school. I went to a Catholic school until 7th grade. Then I moved to the public school in eighth grade. But so by the time 11th grade came along, I don't know how old you are when you're 11, maybe 14, 11th grade, 15 maybe.
Yeah,
There
15.
was a guitar class in the music department of the high school. And it was quite a popular class. And by that time, I could play a little bit. I also got into the big band to play. In those days, it was, you know, that was the job, right?
Of
For
course.
the rhythm guitar player. And I remember talking to Steve Alfrey, who was the music teacher at the school. He was very supportive. He played a little classical guitar, and so he was very supportive. In fact, a wonderful guitar player named Steve Holman, who lives still in Sacramento, is a really, really great guitar player. He was about 4 years before me or 3 years before me. So the legend of Steve Holman loomed large in, the music room there.
Wow.
But anyway, I remember after, I don't know, a couple of weeks of big band practice, I asked my teacher, I said, what I really want to do is I want to play like the horns are doing. I want to play the whole song with like the and he kind of shook his head and sort of scratched his chin. Said, Tim, I don't know. That doesn't sound like that's possible. But I remember very, very distinctly wanting to play the whole song,
Yeah.
and that's the beginning of what I'm still trying to do right now to this moment, play the whole song.
Yeah, well, I mean, and you do that brilliantly. So I mean, I am curious about that. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about that a little more, your style, but who was the first person you heard play in that way that kind of freaked you out?
Yeah. It was probably Joe Pass.
Yeah.
I know that Joe Pass loomed large in my early development. The but it could also been Tiny Grimes because I
Ooh,
remember somehow, and I don't know how this happened. I went to the record store to buy my dad a record for his birthday, and I picked out Art Tatum Trios. Like, it was a kind of a gray record, a double album. I haven't seen this particular um, uh, record reissued, although I'm sure the music exists in other packaging.
right.
And I didn't have any idea what it was. I just thought, well, my dad's old and he would probably like this old music or something. And I couldn't get him to listen to it. He probably never listened to it once. I gave it to him and he because my dad wasn't very musical. I don't think he really listened to music in the car or anything like that. But I listened to it. And if you're familiar with that trio, Art Tatum, Slam Stewart, and Tiny Grimes,
Hmm.
Tiny Grimes played a four-string guitar. I believe it was tuned like the top four strings of a regular guitar.
I think you're right.
And he played mostly rhythm guitar and took melodic solos, but there were some chordal sounds in there that I found very intriguing. Another source was probably Howard Roberts, and through a very interesting backward way, the TV had. I was in the summer times. I was allowed to watch TV in the morning, and there was always a few shows that I liked to watch. One of which was the Beverly Hillbillies, and
Sure.
in the Beverly Hillbillies there were some very short cues, guitar cues, like all three of them walk into the front door of the mansion, and the door closes, and then there's a little cue, and it might have been something like, you know,
Right. Yeah.
right. And I think it was probably Howard Roberts. I don't think it was Barney Kessel, but I would have to go back and review, because I just have this sort of slightly, almost not quite photographic musical memory. And that was a big thing for me too, because I heard that sound of a clean, pure guitar that sounded warm and round instead of the more buzzy and fuzzy guitars that I had heard.
Yeah.
And it really appealed to me. And it sound and the Tiny Grimes connection. And so I was kind of hooked on jazz guitar as I was understanding it. I also really liked blues guitar. That was more about the individual notes. I went crazy for the Beano album, which I think a lot of people do.
Oh yeah.
I can hear that record in my head, now. I really liked Lightning Hopkins. And I would listen to this music in the living room after school, and my mom would come in and say, "It's making me a little nervous." But but anyway, I remember, having that Art Tatum record and the Lightning Hopkins record and the Beano record, and amongst other things, were in really strong rotation during my formative listening years when I realized I'd gotten an electric guitar by then and I could play a little bit and, you know,
Wow. What was the first electric guitar?
um, my brother had found out I liked guitar, and he loaned me a nice Martin 0018, which I kind of became my first real good guitar. And then I remember I wanted an electric guitar. I took a quick little side trip to electric bass because I thought that maybe it would be fun to do that, but it turned out I didn't enjoy it much. And so but then I remember putting a guitar on layaway in a town, not like the next town over from where I lived. And my sister drove me over there, and I put money down on what apparently was an Ibanez no name Les Paul, which
Okay.
I wish I still had because I remember it being a very, very good guitar.
Yeah,
And
so like the lawsuit era. Yeah.
or maybe just before the lawsuit era, because it didn't have Ibanez written up there. It had
Oh, okay.
no name at all.
Yeah.
But I think it was probably Tokai or Ibanez. And that was my first electric guitar, and I ordered through the mail order a Trainer amplifier. I have no idea why,
Wow. I wonder
but
how you arrived on that. Yeah.
it was in some catalog. It was just in a catalog. I don't know why it was there. They were from Canada, oddly, and
Yeah.
it was a 212. It was a twin tube amplifier with a master volume, which
Hmm.
I had no idea how to use. I didn't understand it. But anyway, that was my first electric guitar rig, and I used it, until I mean the whim of chasing guitars has always been strong with this one.
With all of us.
Yeah, I've traded and bought and sold so many guitars.
Wow, that's well. You could have done much worse though on your first rig. It sounds like pretty solid.
Yeah, even that little nylon string guitar that I got, which oddly enough, for some reason, I lost track of that guitar. I think I left it up in the music room at the high school, got this other guitar from my brother, and just left that guitar there and completely forgot about it.
Wow.
I've done that before too.
Oh, amazing, man. Well,
And,
okay, so you're progressing. You're getting into jazz. You're listening to records. You're playing at school. You're playing at the VFW, playing Western swing and stuff. When do you start to like play gigs or maybe make some money playing the guitar?
yeah, unlike you, I feel like you had maybe a little help or a little bit of a different type of town you lived in. Um, I didn't know about clubs or sitting in or jamming or anything. It just wasn't my people didn't know about that. Um, so I remember playing a solo guitar recital in junior high. I played a song called "Pigtown Fling," which is a Stephen Grossman ragtime piece because I was my because I couldn't figure out how to be in a band. I didn't want to play those songs. I had an acoustic guitar, and I really loved the whole ragtime blues thing. Kicking Mule Records were something I was because it had a tablature book inside. I loved Blind Blake, and I loved all that old anything. I went through a period of time right around that same time where I'd go to the record store, and if there was an old black guy holding an acoustic guitar, I would just buy the record,
Mhm.
with my paper route money or something.
Wow.
So I listened to a lot of, scratchy records. But anyway, I learned this song, Pigtown Fling, and I think I might have played and sang a tune or something. I remember sitting on the right side of the stage and playing this tune and, getting a nice applause from the audience. Did a few, those types of high school recital type things. I remember playing Bach Invention number 4 with a flute player, two-part invention, and that was later on in a similar high school kind of thing. But I remember there was an older guy at our school who played trumpet, and his name was, if you can believe it, Jose Bueno. And my joke was, that Jose Bueno, he thinks he's Joe Good. Uh, and he put a record out, which was for me like, oh my God, this guy put a record out. That's what I want to do. And he got a job, I think, an adjunct sort of assistant in high school. This was by the time I was in high school, and he picked up me and Steve Ackley and I can't remember who, maybe Danny Pertel on drums, and he got a gig at some VFW hall or something in a little town nearby, and we went and played the gig. And he had some charts, maybe we had about 45 minutes worth of music, which we played 3 times or something like that. But that was my first, and I got paid for that one.
Yeah. Which
I
is
was I must have
such a
been
great
15.
feeling, right?
Yeah, it was, and it also taught me something. Because we got, it was so funny. There's this cliche that the drunk guy coming up to the bandstand.
Of
And,
course.
and I've read about this. And some drunk guy comes up and says, why don't you play Melancholy Baby? I mean, and literally a drunk guy came up to the bandstand and told us to play Melancholy Baby. I could not believe it. But it was so funny. And we were all just having fun. We didn't understand. I mean, the leader was probably only 3 or 4 years older than us,
Sure.
but I remember something that stuck with me really, really strongly. Someone said, "Do you guys know Strangers in the Night?" And I said, "I know it." They pointed at me, and I went, "Strangers in the night, exchanging glances. I don't know anything more of that song." Since I've learned it, but you know what I mean? I thought I knew the song, and so I launched into it, and they're all like following me and watching my fingers. And then the second phrase of the song, I had no idea where it went. And so what it taught me was be more prepared. But it was, now I think about it, and it's absolutely hilarious. But it was one of those things where I kind of just like, really screwed the pooch, but learned a good lesson from it.
We've all been there. And again, nothing like that on the job. Like when you make a mistake like that, or even just a snafu, it's like, oh well, that'll never happen again. Once you've done
Yeah.
it the one time, that thing never happens again. Yeah.
And also, I don't know about you, but do you ever notice also that if you don't know a song, but you learned it on the bandstand, like somebody calls it and you say, well, if the bass player knows it, I never forget those ones.
Never, never.
Right.
Once I play it on a gig situation, it's there. It'll be recalled back. Yep,
But I've
always.
had gigs where I read a book, where the gig had a show or something and I read the
Yeah,
book. I'd read the book for a year and I couldn't remember that stuff.
yeah. When you because you're just relying on the paper. Yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah. I
doesn't
know that
engage the part
exactly
of
the
your,
feeling. Yeah.
right. It doesn't engage the part of your brain that remembers stuff. Anyway.
So when you're getting ready to finish school, have you already kind of decided, that this is your life? Like
Oh,
this is what you're.
absolutely. Yeah, I was, I was ready I mean, I knew within the first couple of, months of it, this is what I'm a guitar player. I know there was no question. To my parents' credit, they didn't really try and talk me out of it or force me to do something. I would have been miserable going to state college or something at the age of 18, right out of high school, It might have been good for me, but I would have been miserable. I wasn't in the state of mind that would have made that beneficial for me. So I moved out. I just started doing it, you know,
So what were you doing? Just any kind of gig you could get your hands on,
any
basically,
kind
right
of
from the
gig.
time.
Yep, trying to get into a band, taking solo gigs. But because I worked in a music store and a record store, sort of alternately, I was around, I'd get, hey, do you want to play at my, this funeral or whatever, And but then I did this thing where I'd been out of high school and working at a guitar store or a music store. I can't remember which one it was at the time. I'd moved out of my parents' house and I had my own car. I bought a car for my dad, who was
Yeah.
our family car, a little Volkswagen Bug. And I'd moved out to a house full of hippies, and I decided to take a trip. And I'd saved up about $1,200. I had a Martin guitar. Um, can't really remember how I got it, but I think I might have paid $300 for this old Martin, um, and uh, and a Volkswagen. And I took the passenger seat out of the Volkswagen, and I put an ice chest in its place and laid a piece of plywood so I could sleep in my car. And I took a road trip, and I ended up. It was the summer between. I turned 18, and right at the first day of school. Usually, or I mean, I turned the age you're supposed to be in the class right on the first day of school or something like that. So
Gotcha.
this was like right before I turned 18. Um, I left and I drove around trying to figure shit out. I mean, my stupid fantasy image was I was going to go to Mississippi and sit under a tree with an old black man, and he was going to teach me how to play. I mean, I literally thought that, and I went to Lafayette, Louisiana, because I was going to get into Clifton Cheniere's band.
Wow.
I mean, you know what I mean? It's I was so insulated or naive. I had no idea, Josh, what the world was like outside of Woodland. But I left and did all these things. I remember driving through North Texas and pulling into some place, and they were having a square dance in the other room adjacent to this restaurant. And the guy took a shine to me. I told him, I'm a little kid, really, literally driving my car around. And he said, "Hey, you like jazz guitar?" "Yeah, I like jazz guitar. Let me show you some stuff." He took me in the back room and put on this reel-to-reel tape, and there was some guy just burning on Western swing numbers, right? And then I sat and listened, watched the square dancing, and the next day I got in my car and drove away. I mean, little experiences like that all over the place. I just wandering around, walking by in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and I hear Charlie Parker. And I had already heard Charlie Parker. In fact, he was huge. I heard Charlie Parker and it like completely exploded to my brain. And I'm walking down a street in a town I just drove into, and I hear Charlie Parker. So I go and knock on the door.
Ah,
And I say, "Hey, I really like Charlie Parker too." And it turned out that this guy was kind of a hippie. There was a university, I think, in that town. I'm not maybe not exactly right about that, but he was kind to me, and I remember him inviting me in, and we chatted, and he told me about a gig that he knew about, and I could go and sit in or open mics and all that kind of stuff all around. And I ended up being in New Orleans. I got a great New Orleans story. I drove down into New Orleans. I'd never been in a bar before in my life. And in New Orleans, I could get into a bar. So I walk into this bar and I order a beer, which I'd only drunken, beer maybe on a few occasions badly and thrown up in high school or whatever. So I order a beer and there's a band playing, kind of Dixielandish, sort of older vintage jazz, not quite Dixieland. And he brings, I sit down at a table and all of a sudden 2 beers show up. And I think, "Excuse me, sir." I only ordered 1 beer. He said, "2 drink minimum, kid." you know, they bring them both at the same time. and and I'm sitting there listening. I'm drinking my beer, and there's a guy at the bar who's really making a ruckus, and drunk and kind of obnoxious, and laughing real loud and kind of I'm wanting to watch the music and that goes on for a while and I'm drinking my beer and then the band takes a break and I hear the band leader walk over toward the bar and say, "Oh, hello, Mr. Ellis. Really nice to meet you. Thank you for coming in." And and I turned around. It was one of my heroes, Herb Ellis, in a pair
Jeez.
of green plaid pants and a green plaid sports jacket. And him and a woman who we had befriended were rather drunk and having, an evening. And I couldn't believe it. I like chased after him
Oh my
on the
God.
streets of New Orleans to say hello and shake his hand. But it was an interesting part of my life.
Well, amazing that you had saved up this money and you just left. You just went on this trip.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, I
crazy to
know.
me.
It was pretty screwed up too because I remember, um, like 3 months into this trip, my car broke down, and for some reason I called my mom. I don't know what promoted that idea, but maybe I don't know. I was really low on money, and I called my mom, and she didn't know where I was. She had no idea that I actually left town. She just wondered where I was, and she said, "Well, we got this insurance bill. They tracked you down and sent you the insurance bill for your car, but it said that you had canceled it." And in my brilliant mind, at the age of 17, I said, "Well, I don't need car insurance. That's something I don't need to pay for." And I just, I mean, gosh, it was just the level of stupidity was incredible. But like, and I was a bad child. I mean, my mom didn't know where the hell I was,
That's crazy.
and I was on this quest. I was so single-minded, Josh, that all I was trying to just, I went to Vicksburg, Mississippi, and the first black man I saw on the street, I said, "Where can I go to hear blues?" And he said, "Well, you can go down there where the white boys go, and you can get it well, you can drink it there, or you can take it with you." And he thought I said booze,
Right. Yeah.
or he didn't want to deal with my question. I don't know,
Interesting.
but and it's just like, if there was a line for me to stand in that said, you know, a stupid white kid who wants to learn how to play music, I would have stood in that line, but there wasn't. So I just had to, like do that thing. You just poke around and
Man. Well, it's so cool though that you were so single-minded like you said. I mean, it takes a lot of dedication to just search it out that to that degree like, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to be doing and I'm going to find it somewhere.
And I got to tell you, Josh, from recollection, I wasn't very good. I didn't, I wasn't playing good at the time. I wasn't like you were by the time you were, a teenager. I'm sure you were killing. I, I wasn't very good. There were a lot of things I could have learned, but I didn't, like how to keep good time, and
Interesting.
how to play, you know, you know, better, play with other people.
Well, then
I wasn't.
when do you feel like you started to then really become a professional?
Well, I came back from that trip, and sort of licked my wounds. It was for me it was maybe about 5 or 6 months, and I ended up like in way up in Wisconsin, just following gigs. Just like we following the situation. And I was in Wisconsin, and the guy I was had hooked up with and was traveling with had some gigs, so that was very very helpful. He was kind of a folk singer, and I would noodle guitar while he and sing background while he sang his songs. Basically he was a single who needed a guy, a young kid with a car or something to get to the gig.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Anyway, we would travel up and down the road and play gigs. And then we were up in Wisconsin. He said, "Well, I want to go to New York, and so I'll see you later." And I didn't have any gig or any money. I'd run out of my money, so I just started driving home, and barely made it. It was a comedy of errors. But anyway, so when I got home, I went and found another job at a music store, and started teaching guitar again, and playing gigs when I could, and getting into little bands, and all that same stuff.
And so okay. So then when does it become, because there's always that moment when like it flips from like, okay, I'm kind of, playing gigs and paying my bills to like, feeling like a real serious, like good musician. When did you feel that happen?
I'm hoping I'll feel that tomorrow.
Come on, man.
No, but no, it was because I wasn't a band guy, because I hadn't, like your training was on a bandstand with other
Yeah,
guys,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
My training wasn't. My training was mostly by myself, trying to figure out what to do. So I would get gigs. I never had like a regular gig when I was younger because, I didn't know what you had to do that. And there's also this. Who knows? I could psychologize it all I want, but I was playing, I was teaching. So that was how I was, what was the consistent thing is I was a guitar teacher. And I sometimes feel like I should pay everybody back. I should, I should give all that money back because I don't think I was a very good guitar teacher. But anyway, I was doing that and playing gigs and a lot of times playing solo receptions and things. I have a recording of myself playing solo guitar when I was 17 or 18 that I went over to one of the guys from that Western Swing group
Right.
gathering and recorded. He had a reel to reel, and I went over to his house and recorded about 6 or 7 songs that I'd been working up. And I listened. If I listened back to it, I haven't listened to it in years, but I remember listening back to it, thinking, "Well, I didn't. I was doing all right. I was making it." So I'd get gigs opening, for there was a theater near in the town that I lived in that had occasionally the jazz players would come, and I knew the guy who ran the place, so he'd invite me to play 20 minutes of solo guitar before
Mhm.
the famous person came on, or those kinds of things. But it was never 5 nights a week. That happened later, of course. But it was more just catch as catch can,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
those types
Did
of
you,
things.
did you enjoy teaching back then when you were young?
Yeah, I've always loved it. I know that there are folks who teach, especially right now, around now, there are people who are teaching who hadn't really thought of it until they couldn't play gigs. But I've always loved teaching, you know. There's something about the one-on-one interaction and the discovery. It helps me. I learned so much because I was trying to teach about it. You know how
Interesting. Well,
that
yeah.
goes.
I mean, that's I'm one of those guys you said who doesn't love it, and I've done more of it during this pandemic than I have ever done, really. And the biggest takeaway is, yeah, I enjoy helping other people find stuff, but what I enjoy the most, I think, is the stuff it triggers in me that I then go work on after I get off the lesson with the person.
You're
I
right.
like that.
And that's always been that way for me. I sometimes in the early days I was just staying one page ahead of my students. One page in the book ahead.
Right.
Um, but never been one to admit that I didn't know something and sort of pretend you do and then you go forward. But no, I
And
love teaching. I still love teaching. I don't want to do too much of it because it does take me away from my trajectory. But luckily, though, Josh, these days, and you probably feel the same way, I don't have to teach outside of my lane anymore like I used to have to.
yeah, right.
Like I used to have to learn stuff that I would never have learned because my student wanted to learn it. And I
Right.
think that ultimately helped me, brought it into my mind. But these days I can really teach sort of in my lane and people are coming to me to learn what I know or what I do. And so that's nice.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's not just in teaching in music too. It's like when I get called for sessions at this point now, I get called because of the way I play, not just
Yeah.
because of a you could play guitar, I need you to play whatever this thing is. And
Yeah.
same with teaching, people come to me because they want to learn what I do, or same with you. And yeah, it makes it not easier but more like, okay, like I could do this. Yeah.
It's also nice not to have to teach, half an hour eight or 10 half an hour lessons for low dough to kids who don't really want to be there and in a tiny little room. I mean, I did all that, but I'm glad I enjoy it a lot more now. I really love it actually because I'm always studying. I'm always enthusiastic to learn, and so teaching puts me kind of in an environment where that's the expectation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, and you're really good at it. Oh man. So then, as you've moved along, through your process of becoming where you're at now, you know, well, first off, actually, I wanted to ask, what did your parents think? You got back from your trip, and you get a normal teaching job again, or working at a music store, and you're playing this gig and that. Were they worried about you?
Oh, of
Like
course, they're probably
was this
still
fad
worried.
gonna end?
But Josh, I got to tell you, maybe it's not this. Maybe this environment isn't the time to say it. But I mean, I've been worrying my parents, all of my life. Uh, yeah, so I think, like I said, by the time I came along, they were a little bit worn out. So they. Were just happy I didn't die. No, he didn't. Is he dead yet? No, he's okay. So good.
Yeah, I
But
guess so.
eventually, I want to answer one little bit because I feel like you poked at it a little bit and I sort of flopped around. But
Sure.
eventually, I moved down to L.A., went to a year of GIT, and then
Oh,
got out of GIT and taught there a little bit in the summers, and then was living in Los Angeles, realizing that there wasn't any jobs, for a guy playing. I needed more jobs than I could find as a solo guitar player. So I learned how to play country guitar, and I learned how to play, relatively okay classic rock guitar, all these things I'd been hearing my whole life.
right.
Um, I got this great gig at a Russian restaurant playing Russian music, which I didn't even, I mean, 200 songs a night that I never even knew the names of, but they would count them off and tell me what key and I would play.
Wow.
The bass player would play the downbeat and I'd play the second beat, because that's the kind of music. I did that. I avoided top 40 and heavy metal and stuff. Played in a couple of original bands. Went on the road with a 50s vocal group. And at that time got to play with a lot of people on that circuit. I played with Little Anthony and the Platters and the Coasters and the Drifters. And, the band I was in was the Diamonds, and they
Nice.
carried their own band. And so that was a really great uh, that was probably my first real serious night after night professional, band politics, road survival, all that kind of stuff. And I was probably 24 or 5 by the time that happened.
Oh, so by then your parents probably started to breathe a little bit easier, knowing you were making a living.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it wasn't. Um, I really don't. I don't know. I don't know what
Did
my
you
parents thought.
did you enjoy your year at GIT?
I did. I stayed in Joe DiOrio's and Ron Eshte's room pretty much the whole time.
Yeah.
I was a really bad student. I mean, I have this. I was studying with Ted Green, and at the time, I started studying with Ted in about '82, going down to LA to occasionally to meet him.
Mhm.
And and then I went to GIT because I was a fan of Howard Roberts's seminars. I went to a Howard Roberts seminar in high school. That was another part of my education. That those weekend seminars he used to do probably before your time, and ended up at GIT. And I realized that I'd already learned a lot of the classroom material, or at least I thought I did. And so, but
Mhm.
there's Joe DiOrio sitting there, and I loved him, and he liked me, and he was there alternating with Ronnie Echte. So on Ronnie's weeks, I'd tail around with him to the extent that he let me. And then with Joe, I'd just go in his room and hang out and bother him all day long. And I participated in the school. I had friends that I still have now that I really enjoy my friendship with, and I played in the ensembles and I did all that stuff. And I did enjoy it. I didn't participate in the program very much.
Huh, yeah. I don't think people realize back then how much of a jazz school that it really was.
It was a jazz school and also a Larry Carlton, Robin Ford kind of school, and that a lot
Hmm.
of guys with 335s trying to play the sweet licks,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What about Tommy? Was he ever around? Tedesco?
Tedesco.
Yeah.
Tommy only came when I was there. Tommy only came to do, the occasional seminar, and then he
Mm,
took us to the studio at the end of the program. There
right.
were guys who sought him out. I know a friend of mine, Bart Samolis, who could read. He could sight read Donna Lee, and I mean, it was like ridiculous how good he was. He's now a bass player, one of the top upright bass players in like the film scoring industry in LA. But he actually went toward Tommy and tried because he wanted to be a studio guitar player.
Yeah.
I thought at the time I wanted to be the next Jim Hall, so that was that was where I was headed. Of course.
Right. Man.
Anyway, so I did all
Man.
that, and then I figured out how to be in a band. Spent years being a sideman, playing in casinos and playing in R&B, old school R&B, learning all that stuff that I'd heard my whole life, but and trying to do jazz, and trying to do everything, and you know.
Did you? I mean, was there? Oh, well, we'll get to Ted Green in a second. But as far as like the playing in the band thing, was it always like a compromise for you? Was there something
Oh,
about it that didn't feel right?
it was hard as hell, Josh, because I didn't know how to do it. I wanted to play like, let's say we're going to play Midnight Hour, and it's like, I wanted to go.
Yeah.
I wanted to play the song as I imagined it in my head. All my life, I always filled stuff in. And so consequently, one of the things I had to learn when I started playing in bands is not to step on everybody else's shit
Yeah.
and play the
Absolutely.
guitar part, which was sometimes my least favorite thing on the record, you know, and,
Yes.
uh,
Yeah.
and stay out of everybody's way and play my little thing. That was hard for me. It was an ego battle, because like here's a little thing that I kind of reminisced about. When you're young and you have a young man's ego, one of the things you want to do, at least what I wanted to do, was to stand out.
Sure.
And one of the things you have to learn if you're going to play in the pocket is to disappear.
Yes, to some degree, absolutely.
I mean, fundamentally, if you're standing out and you're trying to play in a rhythm section, you're not in the pocket. You might stand out for the occasional cool things, the things we love, those little things that Cornell would do. You know what I'm talking about. But
Of
half the
course.
time it's almost invisible what those guys, the greatest rhythm players, are doing. It's really in there, deeply embedded into the fiber of the groove.
Hmm.
And so for someone who wants to stand out and get noticed, that's not the right mindset to play in a rhythm section. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, that was like one of those life lessons that you learn, and I learned them late because I had spent so much time, you know, thinking I wanted to be, a solo guitar hero.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said so. You started driving down to see Ted Green. How did you even hear about him? I'm always
Oh,
curious,
that's a good
because
story.
everybody here in LA has some crazy story about how they first met him and went to the house and all this, and it's very interesting to me.
Yeah. So I was aware of Ted Green. I worked in this guitar store, and his books came out, and the guitar store
Okay.
carried them. And then somehow I found out about his record, the one record that he made. I may have listened to that before, uh, before this particular event that I'm going to tell you about. But then my boss at the music store wanted to go to the NAMM show, and this might have been 1978,
Okay.
right? 79 maybe, but probably 78. And he asked me if I'd like to go to the NAMM show. So we flew down to Anaheim, stayed in a hotel and went to the NAMM show. It was really funny because I walk into the NAMM show and the first guy that walks up to me is an older man who walks up and says, "Hey, how you doing? I'm Mel Bay." Shook my hand
Oh
and gave me
wow.
a little packet of Mel Bay propaganda. And I thought to myself, holy shit, that was Mel Bay. So I'm wandering around the NAMM show and I meet Herb Ellis, and he wasn't. He was in good shape this time. At the NAMM show, he had the Aria had released a, a Herb Ellis model guitar, and he was
Yeah.
there at the booth. And I played that, and I played for him, and he gave me a pat on the head. Good way to go, kid. And I ran into all sorts. I saw all sorts of stuff. As you know, NAMM show's still kind of like that.
Yeah.
Now you're one of the guys, people that they go to the NAMM show and they say, "Oh, I met Josh Smith. He was just standing there. He was playing somebody's pedal, whatever." Anyway, I walked past the Dale Zednick booth, and there was Ted playing a telly with his leisure suit on and in front of a whole wall full of, covers of, the books that he had made.
Right.
And I just stood there transfixed, and I did not talk to him. But I stood in front of him for, I don't know, seems like all day, but it must have been 15 or 20 minutes.
Right.
And then later after that, because then that's where I really went, okay, this is the dude. This is the guy. He plays so beautifully, and I like the Telecaster, and he looked cool, and he was shy, and he wasn't an asshole from what I could tell. He was
Mm.
beautiful and sensitive. And so I was playing jazz in Sacramento, going over and playing gigs and hanging out and sitting in and doing the whole thing. And a guy named Doug Pauly said I had played an arrangement of "Fly Me to the Moon" at a jazz gig that I asked if I could play on the breaks. Some other older guys. And so I played "Fly Me to the Moon" and "Foggy Day in London Town" and "Alone Together" and "Autumn Leaves" or something like that. And so this guy, Doug Pauly, who's still in Sacramento, from what I understand, said, "Hey, I hear you like Ted Green. I have his telephone number. Would you like it?" And I said, "Yes, I would." And he gave me his telephone number. The next day, I think, I called Ted on the phone at around 7 in the evening. And, we're in the same, I was up in Sacramento and he was down in
Yeah.
LA. And he talked to me for like a half an hour on the phone. Just a guy out of the blue. And it was funny. He said, "Here, just a second, Tim. I hear what you're saying. I'll be right back." And then he came back to the phone about 30 seconds later. He said, I'm recording a Jimmy Cagney movie that I like the music for, and I had to flip over the tape. And so, that's just such a Ted thing. Like he recorded off the TV with a VCR old movies because he liked the music, and he would
Right.
learn. Anyway, so then I studied with him via the mail, but he was really bad at that. I'd send him $5 and with a question, and then a month or 2 months later, I'd get this beautiful handwritten letter with 3 pages of his little dots. And I'd work on it, like this, and finally, it was the gal I was with at the time. Her parents lived in Agora.
Okay.
And so we went down there for Thanksgiving, and I called Ted and said, "Hey, I'm going to be down nearby you." This was probably 1983, maybe 82. I can't exactly recall. And I said, "Can I come for a lesson?" And he was living in his parents' house at that time in Woodland Hills on Winnetka Street. And the day after Thanksgiving, I went over to his house and had about a 2 or 3 hour lesson in the afternoon. That was the first time I met him. And then I only studied with him very sporadically after that. After I moved down to LA, I would go up and see him, but I had no car, so it was hard for me. You know how it is. You can't, if you're
Mm.
living in Hollywood, you can't get to, the valley very easily,
Right.
by bus or whatever. So
Yeah.
anyway, I did my best, and he would always load me up with, tons of stuff and pat me on my head and send me on my way.
That's crazy, man. It's been interesting interviewing a lot of guys, LA guys, and they all have their stories, about the going to the house and the clutter and all the things and
Yeah,
yeah.
right. The
Yeah.
clutter wasn't such an issue in my early days. When he moved to the apartment in Reseda, I think it was Reseda, it got worse. And he was after a while, he was only teaching in there, and he was, sleeping and living at Barbara's house. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, all those stories. I loved him so much. He helped me so much. He has a really huge impact. Him and Joe DiOrio. I've been fortunate to meet and study with, or learned from many, many wonderful people, but those two guys just kind of loom large for me.
Yeah, well, how could they not? I mean, geez Louise, talk about genius, both of them.
Yeah.
Oh, and that before we get into the 10 questions, you mentioned the telly there for a second because of Ted.
Yeah.
Did you play a telly before Ted? And when did the telly become a thing for you?
I got my first telly. I went down to Oakland and from Davis. A friend of mine took me, who was familiar with the neighborhood, and I got a what was probably a nice old '50s telly, and it didn't cost me very much money, but it was all stripped,
Mm,
and it had a mini humbucker up here and just a regular telly bridge in the back. I wish I still had that guitar, but I got it before I moved down to LA, a couple of years before I moved to LA. And I used it on my sort of early band explorations, like when I was trying to learn how to play in, R&B bands or blues
mm.
bands and things like that. I had a Stratocaster before that, but I lost that Stratocaster somehow. How things go.
You just lose guitars. You just leave them, huh?
Well, no, I don't know if I lost it, but you got to pay your rent. I mean, you're down to
Oh
like
yeah.
nothing, and you got this guitar you can get, $200 for or something like that. Anyway, uh, yeah. So then I had that guitar, um, and let it go, and then got another one and let it go. Um, because for some reason I had been playing an ES 175, a 1952 ES 175 was my main guitar, and compared to that, the Telly was still a little foreign feeling to me.
Hmm.
Um, but I had them, and I played them when it was necessary. Um, I wish I had kept that guitar and maybe even bought two or three dozen more at that time because you could get into them relatively reasonably. Um, but I didn't really become a dedicated telly guy um, until later, a
Okay.
few years later. I couldn't play the ES 175 anymore. I mean, it was stuffed. It was like a underwear drawer in there, and then it just became untenable. The style of music that I was being asked to play and all of that, I ended up either using Strats or Tellys after that. You know.
Nice. Nice. All right, let's get into our 10 questions here.
Okay,
All right. So, we did kind of touch on some of these, but it'll be good to get
I'll do my best not to be
the skinny.
reiterate.
Number one, when you first started learning and playing, what was the first thing that when you figured it out, you were hooked after? It was like you can't believe you just learned this. It was just blew your mind.
you know, Sloop John B. For some reason,
Wow.
oddly enough, I thought it was a Beach Boys song, of course, and my mom said, "Oh no, that's an older, much older song than that." Uh
Wow.
oh, Mr. Vibrolux is acting badly. Anyway, yeah. So that was the first to be able to play that D chord and add the sus,
Yeah,
and you know,
man.
and
I
then
know.
also, "Hey Mr. Tambourine Man" by Bob Dylan was another early
Sure.
song.
Yeah.
Um, and then I learned how to do these kinds of things, or all that stuff. I got that, by listening to Lightning Hopkins, and
Yeah.
and all those things are all mixed together. I'm not sure which, that and this thing, which is my sort of,
It's pretty fucking hip
distinct.
though to be listening to Lightning Hopkins as a teenager in Sacramento, California.
Well, I don't know. I feel fortunate. I don't know how I got it, but like I said, it was the black man on the cover of a record with a guitar. I had Mance Liscombe and Furry Lewis and
Yeah.
Lightning Hopkins and Blind Blake and Reverend Gary Davis. I mean, those guys. I mean, that's what I wanted to play, and so I was this
Yeah.
alien dude, compared to what my friends were into.
Oh yeah, especially at that time. I mean, yeah, you're talking about Kiss, yeah, 70s. I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
These are
or even just like Me and You and a Dog Named Boo, or you know what I mean? Which is a dumb old song, which you probably don't even know. It's like a pop, top 40 radio song.
mm, wow. Ugh. Okay, so you said you didn't really learn solos note for note or anything like that. But was there ever one that you just you wanted to learn note for note, or that you
Yeah, I mean,
put
I
some time
learned
into?
I learned from the Layla record, and before that, even the Beano record. I think I learned a lot of stuff. Like for instance, there's a solo I could probably. I don't know. Anyway, I learned how to fumble my way through stepping out and hideaway, and
Sure.
that song. There's a
Yeah. Yeah. My little girl.
I'm
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, My Little Girl. I just played it by ear. I didn't use the bends that I remembered learning, but so it's all in there. That one and the Layla record, I wore that out and learned, like, Have You Ever Loved a Woman and Key to the
Yeah.
Highway. And I didn't really learn them. I didn't ever sit down with my guitar and try and learn them, but or move the needle. I just played along with them a lot, like that. And
Yeah.
Live at the Regal was like every day after school. I would, after I got that Les Paul, I would be playing along with BB King. I mean, what better band could you play along with, Of
Yeah.
course, I didn't learn all of the things that you might have learned on a bandstand where you shut up when the guy's singing and you don't just play, noodly leads the whole time.
Yeah.
But that's what I did. That's
Man, it's funny. The My Little. I mean, the Beano record so important for people your generation. I don't want to make it sound like you're older, but you are older than me.
I am. I'm
So
20 years older than you, I
yeah.
think.
So I mean, there's an amazing video recently that just came out of nowhere of Stevie Ray sitting in a bedroom somewhere playing a Les Paul, and he plays that solo note for note jokingly. But all I can see when I watch that video is, oh, that's him when he's 12 years old on the edge of his bed, and he'll never forget it. That he
Right.
looked like a little kid doing it. It was like amazing. Yeah.
That record also exposed me to a couple of other things that I'm really profoundly happy about. For instance, I learned about Mose Allison from that record
Right.
because John Mayall did Parchman Farms, and then I went to, and Mose Allison is probably my biggest influence uh, um, in blues away from guitar.
I can hear that.
If that's slicing it too thin, Like I learned, there's a song called, there's a record called Mose Allison's Greatest Hits, and then there's another one which has a lot of the same tunes on it called Mose Allison Sings. I still sing all those songs. If someone says, "Hey Tim, why don't you sing one?" I'm going to sing one of those songs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that record, yeah, it all connected up, and
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason it was a big watershed moment for so many. Yeah.
yeah,
It is a special moment in time. Absolutely.
yeah.
All right, number 3. What's the first thing you play every time you pick up a guitar? Do your hands just go somewhere?
I like the key of F, and so I'll
It's
usually
because
play
that's what key
something.
your mom played piano in.
Yeah, maybe. And I'll play some sort of uh, kind of melodic chordal passage.
Hmm.
That's maybe the most recent thing that I would play. I've had times when I played, all of those things too. It all depends on sort of where my head's at. But yeah, I like to. I'm not a very good practicer, Josh, but what I do is I play music that I like and I search inside of it and I play it, around. I do what I call musing. It's just my own little way of saying something besides noodling. But
Sure.
I muse on a tune, I hear it in my head and I'm trying to grab it out of the guitar. So that's usually what I do is I pick it up. And it also helps me determine whether a guitar is playable or for me or not. Is
Well,
if I
yeah,
play something.
yeah, that was part of that's the B side of this question. Like, if you go in to try out guitars, is there something you do that lets that this guitar can work for you or not, or if it's comfortable?
Yeah, I try things like I like this part of the guitar. Oh, that sounded weird, but that sort of sound up there. I love to hear if a guitar sings up there. Sometimes they don't.
Hmm.
Um, and I'll play that kind of thing. That's my version of this, which is what a lot of hip guitar players might play because it's sort of self-contained.
Yeah.
You know, you play a low E and then you can play those beautiful,
Yeah.
things.
Oh yeah, I'm guilty. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, and it's not something to be feel bad about. It's it's a beautiful thing.
Well, that leads me into this question. What kind of groove or key style song is there something you hear like a narration that goes by? Is it always that kind of circle of fifths just moving through changes type thing, or do you have a certain other kind of groove that kind of lives in your head or style as you're cooking breakfast or something?
Yeah, for the very, very longest time, it was is this kind of a jazz blues thing, and I would spin it walking down the street, always it was always going, and that still can be the default position, and but it's me playing, it's not
Hmm.
listening to the sound of one of my favorites, but these days more and more it's a tune that I'm musing about.
Hmm.
Uh, I'll play variations and renditions in my mind when I'm away from the instrument.
Yeah.
Um, Willow Weep for Me came up into my brain this morning, and I played it for a minute, and like for the rest of the day, I have a feeling me spinning through Willow Weep for Me in some fashion, improvising on the changes, playing the melody, trying to find inner
Yeah.
voices or whatever. You know.
That's cool. So when you okay, so if you're in the car and a piece of music comes on you've never heard before, do you pay attention to like what your initial thought is a lot of the time? Is it an improv over the top? Is it a reharmonization? Is it just listening to the groove? Where do you go normally?
Okay, well, I have to say I don't listen to music in the car. I don't like to listen to music when I can't just listen to it.
Oh, okay.
So usually when I listen to music is when I'm ready to lay in bed. Uh, I'll have music on to listen to until I fall asleep. Or other times when I have time and I want to learn a tune, or I'm studying, or I'm just sometimes I might have music on in the background, but usually not.
Okay.
Um, so that actually promotes this other thing, which is this sort of the music that I have, the storehouse of music that I have inside of my head. But you touch on something. I've always done this, and I continue to do it. I fill things in even the pop songs I was listening to on the radio when I was a kid. I was always improvising little connective noodles in between the melody. Like I'll
Mm,
try. I'm sorry, my guitar is acting funny. I'll try
sorry.
and think of an example. Uh, I'm just mad about saffron. Ba-doo-ba-doo-da-boo-boo. Ah, she's mad about me. Ba-ba-ba-doo-bee-boo-doo-ba. I would sing that in my head when I was 10 years old.
Right.
And that's how I heard the music. That's why it was sometimes hard for me to be a guitar player in a band because I was always adding all this extra shit. And so, yeah, I always really loved that sort of the interwoven melody thing.
Yeah. Well, this question may be simple for you actually it sounds like. It sounds like you from day one kind of knew what kind of guitar player you wanted to be, and by extension, maybe what your voice would be on the instrument. So, like, when did you feel like you started to kind of find it?
Okay,
You sounded
interesting.
like you knew the path you wanted to be on right away, but when do you feel like maybe you started to land on what is your voice?
Yeah. Um, I have a I hope this answer is not too long, but there's some
Sure.
nuance
Yeah.
to it. Um, I had been playing hot guitar, by the time I moved out of LA because I just couldn't get a regular gig down there, and lifestyle was not difficult, and then a kid comes along, and there's a responsibility to live in a good neighborhood where there's good schools and that kind of stuff. And so we moved up to Seattle, my wife at the time and I, and two kids. And I immediately started teaching, and I got gigs right away, sort of the 5 night a week, 6 night a week, 7 night a week variety,
Hmm.
playing either in classic rock cover bands or for a big time what I call the Garth Brooks scare of the early '90s, which was sort of when pop, country, and dance, line dancing. So I was on this circuit for 5 or 6 years, where you'd play 7 nights or 6 nights in one club and you go to another club, or maybe play 2 weeks in a club. There was a circuit where you could play 5 or 6 clubs pretty much continuously and make, whatever, $350 a week doing it. It was like
Hmm.
pretty sick when you think about it. But I was doing that and teaching. And, but I didn't, and I was learning. I learned a lot of Danny Gatton. So I was kind of, that's something else we have in common. I could do a pretty good imitation of the hot country picker who played
Yeah.
blues and jazz and chicken picking, right? And that was kind of my thing. And but but even at that time, I had made a solo guitar record at that time, which was very good actually, if I do say so myself. For the time, it sounded good, and I think I played well.
Hmm.
And I was selling cassettes of it to my students and things. But on the gig, I wasn't playing like that. I wasn't playing myself. I was playing what
Right.
anybody wanted me to do, as we all do when we're trying to do that. But I got kind of dead inside. I didn't want to do it anymore. I was frustrated, and things weren't making me happy. I was, too much in the bars and not enough in the music. So I took a break. In 1994, I made a big change, and I moved to a monastery and didn't play guitar for the better part of 12 years. I had access to a guitar occasionally, but I was, I wanted to figure out who was playing guitar. And this is a big subject, probably not, you know, we don't have time for it. But anyway, I checked out because I wasn't healthy as a hot guitar player. There's certain sensitivities that I have and certain situations that I was in. So I checked out, and I tried to make myself maybe a little more healthy in my mind and my heart.
Hmm.
Somewhere along the line, though, I couldn't shake the music, and so every day there was a meditation period that would last all day long. You're in a meditation retreat for sometimes 5 months out of the year, you know 3 months at a time, and I didn't want to just. I was dedicated and kind of focused and laser like I can be, but I didn't want to just sit there and dream about music all the time on the meditation cushion, because that wouldn't have been so good. So I made a deal with myself. I decided that the meditation period after lunch would be music time. And I would, without any guilt, I would sit on the cushion, in a very beautiful posture. But what I was doing is I was playing music in my mind.
Hmm.
And 10 years of doing that crystallized something in my mind about not only why I wanted to play music. I recalled what the beautiful joy of it was, which had faded away when I was just grinding it out. And I started to hear the things I could see I could see how to play the things I was hearing. I was hearing a tone. I was hearing a sound that was perfect, and so when I left that life and got a guitar again, and I got a Telecaster and a deluxe reverb, and I knew I wanted it to sound like. So, manipulating the instrument was just a matter of reminding my fingers how to do it. So I took a little bit of a break. I'm kind of a late bloomer when it comes to notoriety or being well known or known for anything, because I just had to take a break, and I came back to it later.
Wow. I didn't know that, Tim. That's amazing.
Well, your audience might be among the first, because I don't really advertise it. I don't lead with that. That's for sure. But I think
Right.
it's germane to this conversation, and I'm not embarrassed by it or
No,
shy
why
about
would you
it.
be? Yeah.
I just feel like now would be a good time to say something about it, so that people can maybe have a little insight into where I'm at. And to this day, though, Josh, the things I gained from that time away, which were absent from my mind and heart before, was this. I remembered what it was like to be a young kid, a little kid who loved music beyond belief, and how joyful I was about it. And I bring
Sure.
that to every time I pick up the instrument. Instinctively sort of recall that, whether I'm teaching or playing or just amusing myself or learning something. It definitely allowed me to get straight with it.
Where was the monastery, by the way?
The one I stayed at most was in Rhode Island, right
Really?
right near Duke's house. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I mean, this is too. We can have the monkey ears episode sometime, but because there's lots of fun stories.
Wow, man.
Sneaking out and going over to Duke's house, and my friend Paul Kolesnikov would sneak out and go over to his place, and we'd play. This was after I'd been doing it for a long time, and I was starting to inch my way toward coming back out into the world. I would.
Right. How'd you end up in Rhode Island of all places?
Well, I got involved with a meditation uh, tradition, a school, if you will, and their head temple was in Rhode Island.
Wow. There
And
you
then
go.
I would go to Korea or Hong Kong or Singapore and traveled around a lot, and uh, did that because when you weren't in a retreat, you were traveling.
Yeah. Wow. That's fascinating. Shit. I don't know this question. Number 6. Sounds trivial now, but what's your biggest weakness on the guitar, Tim?
Oh, um, it is. They're there. They're there, and I deal with them. Uh, Something we spoke about earlier is time, feel, and locking in with other people. Ensemble playing, playing like with Pearl Django, which we haven't even mentioned, which I'm a member of that band, and we made 3 records since I've been in the band. A lot of the things I do, which is to play in unison or apart in either unison or in harmony, and Michael Gray, the violinist, is a real stickler for the parts being really well played together because
Oh,
his thing is I don't want to sound like we don't know what we're doing. That's how way he says it. I can remember hearing great records like with Bill Frisell and some other guys where the melody was kind of sloppily played, and I love that too, where the
sure.
two people were sort of feeling their way through the melody together. But learning how to play really in it with somebody else is something I hadn't had a lot of experience doing. So that was something I continue to work on. Playing anywhere I want in the beat is something that I
Okay.
continue to work on. I think it's a weakness for most of us, and I knew it was certainly one for me. Playing something that somebody else played note for note, or playing, really learning a part off of a record that's a signature thing I suck at that. I'm not very good at it. I don't like doing it.
Yeah, I'm not the best at that either. I'm not the best at learning other people's parts note for note.
Yeah. Um, Trying to think of some things that might be
It's
a
interesting
little
how
more.
most of the things you're talking about are time based, being that you've spent so much time playing by yourself. That would make sense, I guess. Not as
Yeah,
much
I mean,
ensemble playing.
right. And I learned how over time. I mean, some of my early recordings that I can remember, like little documentation. The biggest thing was, well, he's playing all the nice notes and he's playing all the nice chords. Then everything's there, except he's rushing like a bitch.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn how to keep good time. I accompanied singers for a lot of time, just two like guitar and singing.
Hmm.
So I really got strong at that, because you're playing with somebody else and you start rushing, they're going to tell you, don't do that.
Well, it's really interesting playing guitar and voice duo because even if you have good time and even if the singer has good time, you both have different time, so it is you'll be, not thinking you're rushing, but they're really dragging you down anyways, and it's like you feel like you're rushing, and it's
Yeah,
always a
I know what
constant
you mean. I know what you
shuffle.
mean. I play it in a duo with Jamie Finley, who you might have run across. Jamie's a wonderful cat and a great guitar player, and we had been hovering around each other for years, not knowing each other. And about 4 years ago, we decided to start playing together. And one of the things we noticed right off the bat, and it was so cool because he said it almost simultaneously with me, is that we agree on the time. It was like these two brains that would become one in terms of the time.
Yeah.
And so it's really nice when that happens. And it's not always true that it does.
Oh yeah, definitely not. Yeah. Yeah, especially in those kind of settings, two people, no drums. Those are the most difficult I find to get time to lock together. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Especially depending on the kind of music.
Well, yeah.
With swing music, it's a little easier because I'm pretty good at playing walking bass lines, and that kind of establishes where the quarter note is, and it's a little easier. But yeah, I know what you mean. It definitely is good work. And then since I've been in Pearl Django, I think it's improved even more in terms of the steadiness of it and the ensemble, being able to do it in an ensemble and really lock my version of time in with everybody else.
That's
But it's a complete evolution. I would imagine that somebody at this whatever stage they're at in their life, they could be really quite accomplished. But we still don't know when we're 40 what we're going to learn between being 40 and 60, and because we
sure.
kind of just don't know what it is yet. We don't know what we don't know. So
Yep.
I feel like I've just been picking away at this stuff, just like a scab, just picking away at it, just trying to get better when the need is there. It's like, okay, you suck at this, get better at that. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. It's certainly never over. As long as you have that mindset, you're in
Yeah,
good shape, you know.
yeah.
Yeah. Who's a huge influence on your guitar playing that maybe people would be surprised to hear?
Um, well, I mean, there's Mose Allison, which I love. He's more of an overall sort of presentation influence, and I just think he's a cool guy. Something we haven't mentioned at all is I love Indian music, and Hari Prasad Chaurasia is a bansuri, which is a bamboo flute. It's the simplest
Mhm.
instrument. It's like a reed with a large bore reed with holes in it
Yeah.
you know, and he plays it so beautifully. And I listened to him a lot, and it was often, as Indian music is, just him unaccompanied, or him with a drone, or him with a tabla. And there's something about the sound he got, which is very round and beautiful and breath filled, that influenced the sound of my instrument, the way I draw the note out. If I play this note, I don't want to hear any scratchiness. I want to hear just a pure, that kind of sound.
Yeah.
So I reach in and pull that note out of the guitar rather than hit the string from a distance, and I think that comes from my love of piano, Bill Evans particularly, and also Hari Prasad, because he could do that on the flute so beautifully. It just sounded like the most beautiful otherworldly voice, just no seams, no scratchiness.
All right, I need to listen to him then. I don't, because that's a
Oh
new one
yeah,
for me.
dude, do yourself a favor, man. He's beautiful. He's beautiful.
Really. All right. This I don't know the answer to this one. Would you rather have a good guitar and a bad amp, or vice versa? A great amp
Okay.
and a bad guitar on a gig.
Yeah. I would say if I'm playing solo and I'm playing usually at a relatively low volume with a clean sound, I would rather have the guitar,
Hmm.
because so much of what I do on the instrument is so demanding, and I need the guitar to be set up in a way that allows for it, and I need to have this sort of low action, heavy strings, and that whole thing.
Yeah.
But if I was playing in a band, uh, and there's a drummer and I'm in an ensemble and I'm a soloist basically, I would take the amp.
Yeah. That makes 100% sense to me, and it's why I choose the amp. Because it's makes me more comfortable. Uh, I could do I yes, I'm going to be better with my guitar, but I know I'll be better with my amp and any guitar than I would be vice versa. normally.
Yeah, and which is ironic because we almost, if we're traveling, we almost never get to play our own amp.
Yeah,
You know,
never, never.
then you have to figure out how to make an amp. And maybe another question that you might add to your list of questions is, if you get stuck with a sucky ass amp,
Yeah,
what are some of your tricks to make it work for
exactly.
you?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
that's really real world.
Oh, totally. I mean, we've all been there a million times,
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. But yeah, it makes sense. I mean, so much of what you play is dependent on the ability to actually physically do that on your instrument. That would
Right.
be
It
more
really
important.
is. And
Yeah.
I don't feel great about that. Um, you know, because I'm not a guy that I know guys like this. You might even be one. You can pick up any guitar, high action, low action, your strings, your whatever, and you can still kill on it. And I can pick up a guitar at a music store or at a friend's house or something and just feel like I can hardly play it.
Yeah, I'm in the middle there somewhere. Like
Yeah.
I can pick up any guitar and kind of make it passable, but because of the strings that I use, it's hard for me if I pick up a guitar that has nines or tens. I'm gonna struggle. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. I use like, for instance, I use 12 to 54
Right.
unwound G.
Yeah.
So,
So we use very
that's a
similar.
yeah, that's a particular voice that I love, and right lately for a long time I tuned that down a half step, but lately I've been playing it up in regular standard as well,
Yeah.
and and if it's too different than that, or if the action's too high, I I can play shooping, I can play you know rhythm guitar or something,
Yeah.
but I can't play solo guitar because you need it to be kind of a little bit more. I need it to be a little more like a laser beam.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, number 9. What keeps you like we just said, pushing and learning new stuff? How do you keep yourself motivated, after you've been playing now as long as you have and you've kind of, I don't want to say settled into what life is, but you found your road and what you do. What keeps you pushing to be better, on the instrument?
Um, that's a great question. It's an important question too because I'm hoping to get another 20 years out of this thing
Yeah.
before the hands fall apart or my brain falls apart or I croak or something. And 20 years is a lot can happen. Um, I think though what it is I hear it in my head and I can't do it like that yet.
Man, it sounds simple when you say that, but it is truly, there's no better motivator. It's like, if there's something I'm hearing, which there's always something I'm hearing that I can't do, then I just have to figure it out.
Yeah, yeah. I know I wake up in the middle of the night looking for it, because sometimes I get a glimpse of it. I am cautious and I caution myself because some of what I can do sounds pretty good, you
A
know,
lot of what you do sounds really good.
and thank you. But I mean, to me, right? So for me, it's like I don't think that the motivator can be external. I think that might be a bit of a privileged perspective though, because I think some people are motivated by just paying the fucking rent,
Sure.
and getting their kids, healthy and safe. And, I mean, I think that's absolutely reasonable and probably maybe more realistic for many. But and so I realize my sort of dreamy, sort of this fantasy that I have that I can play a certain way and hear certain sounds emanating from my fingers tips. It may be something of a privileged position. I'm willing to accept it though because I know that I haven't always. My life history is not just one great opportunity after another. I've struggled. I've had to really hold on to my vision about this because I didn't get much support or encouragement along the way until relatively recently, actually. So for me, the drive, the thing that keeps me going on it is that in the clear moments, I hear something and I can even feel it as music, being played. And I know I can get there. I know I can get it. I know it's possible to get it. And I'm just going to keep trying until I get it, and who knows what it's going to mean. Pretty soon my hands are going to stop complying with with certain things, and then I'll have to re-navigate, but for me, it's like, that like a Japanese painting where you can see all this incredible stuff, but there's very, very few lines in it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on a quest in my life to really just get to the essential thing, pare it down and pare it down to the essential beauty of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good motivator.
That is a good, it's a good quest to be on.
Yeah.
Well, that leads us to number 10, which is, you say you want to get 20 more years out of this. Well, what's the next 5 years you think look for you? What's
Uh,
is there a specific goal in mind, or is it just to keep following the muse, and do what you do?
Yeah, that's it right there. I mean, the goal can make it seem less aimless. And I do have practical things, you know. You and I both work with TrueFire,
Yeah.
and I'd love to be able to build up a larger and larger catalog of very high quality, good instruction with them, that because they want that. They don't put any barriers between me and that goal. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's something I have to come up with myself. Good ideas, good execution, good clear instruction. I want that because I want to be, um, uh, in Zen we say leave no trace, but I can't claim that. I want to leave a little trace. I want to be,
Sure.
um, thought of and respected, and that's one of the things that I think that I can leave as a legacy, not only for myself, but maybe for also for my kids too, just because there is, an ongoing, economic legacy as well. Um, I want to stay healthy. I want to stay sane and kind and open and generous. I want to help uh, the beautiful younger people who come to me for, whatever they come to me for, inspiration or information or encouragement. I want to be able to do that. I imagine, being a little old man with with gnarled fingers, being surrounded by lovely young people who I've taught who care about me, right?
That's
In
awesome.
addition to my family or whatever. But I think it's about someone like Jimmy Weibel. I mean, everybody I talk to, nobody says Jimmy Weibel didn't move me or that didn't
Yep.
he wasn't kind to me, or they might say he's a beautiful guitar player, but that's kind of, we take that sort of as a we know he's a beautiful guitar player, but
Yeah.
what we may not know is that he was a beautiful human being, and he loved people, and he let them love him. So that's kind of, I'm at that stage where I'm not really thinking, Josh, about career
Sure.
stuff. I feel like I've kind of hit the jackpot in terms of being able to pay the bills and do what I love and have enough money to do that. I don't know what I would do with too much more money, except maybe things weren't so good for me. Um, my main kind of trajectory is to stay connected, stay kind, stay generous, and benefit from how that feeds back into my life, you know, to be fulfilled.
Yeah. Well, that's a good, healthy outlook and perspective on where you want to be. You know, yeah, I think I'd enjoy that too. Being the white bearded older gentleman surrounded by all the young people I
I've
helped
almost
along the
got the
way.
beard going already, so. Yeah, I mean, there's this sort of, and Bruce talks about this beautifully as well. Um, and Julian is an example of someone who's actually on the other side of that, who's also, I mean, Julian had great mentors. Julian
Yeah.
was really, really prodigious and sort of, strangely good at a very early age. But he also availed himself to these sort of older men and women who kindly, sort of escorted him through his early days. And he has that beautiful mind as a result of that. So I don't think it just helps me to help other people.
Oh
I
no.
think it helps them to see how it can work for them too. So there's that part of it that it's too small of a world, Josh. You pointed that out right at the very beginning. We got to care for each other. We have to take care of each other, you
Oh
know.
yeah. I mean, even to the little degree that I starting to now get approached when I gig by really, really young players who are doing what I did when I was a kid, wanting to sit in
Right.
and wanting to play, and they could play their ass off, and they're fans of mine. Like, that stuff blows my mind, you know what I mean? Because I can remember literally being exactly where they're standing right now, and yeah, I mean, it is. It's just a big non-stop circle of whatever, and you're just paying
Yeah,
it forward.
I watched the show you did with Matt, and you guys were talking about what it feels like to see on Instagram or on YouTube or whatever some talented young person playing your shit,
Yeah,
right? And I kind of take that a little bit further because I actually provide these arrangements in my sort of cryptic
yeah,
style.
right. You've
Where
got full arrangements. Yeah,
and then they, people get them from me. I used to be donation. Now it's a sort of a small fee to get it from my website. And so I will very often see, be tagged in something where someone's playing an entire arrangement that is based on, 3 or 4 minutes of my life. And it hits me in two different ways. First of all, I almost cry every time it happens because it touches me so much that anybody would care about what I do and with my little stupid fantasy here to spend however many hours it took them to learn how to do it. I mean, that blows me away. And
yeah,
then I also realized that, okay, time to move on, Tim. So an 18-year-old kid in Australia can play your shit really, really well. So now it's time for you to make sure you're still in motion.
yeah,
Make sure you're still in motion because pretty soon, somebody's going to be able to play all of your shit. And
yeah.
so you got to be ahead of that curve. And I don't do that out of resentment. I just think it's a great motivator for me, like, okay.
That's also a good, healthy way to look at it. And that, you know, I I don't look at that way so much with the young people that I see playing my shit, because I give myself enough of that motivation. If there's the one thing that's ever driven me through this whole process, it's the I just want to play new shit tomorrow compared to today. Always. That's definitely the one. That's like the one tenet that is pushes me further. I talk with Kirk about this a lot because it's like it drives me crazy if I hear back a tape of myself from a month ago and I'm not playing new shit now. You know what I mean? Like, so that's always kind of pushed me
Well,
forward.
here's a question for you, Josh. Where do you go for that new shit? Where do you look?
Man, it could be from anywhere. Like, it's from, it could be from completely isolated. I got it out of my own head, or it could be from a lot of times it's a singer or something, or, just,
Right.
but it's just something new, something, different. I just hate feeling like I'm stuck.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I know. I'm with you. I'm with you. I have a little different. I mean, maybe the 20-year age difference is a little different for me because I'm not so interested in new things as I am in penetrating sort of as deeply as possible into the stuff that I do.
Mm,
Um, and a lot of times that's not about notes. And of course, this.
sure.
It's
Yeah.
it's very rarely about notes. It's about something else. And I think that can be new as well, as we can find new appreciation for um, a tune or new appreciation for silence or something that is growth. And so I thought when I was hearing you talk just a moment ago about wanting new, I didn't think you were specifically meaning a new lick.
No, no, not at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. I just wanted to clarify that because it I think depending on where we are in our trajectory, shit, man, at some point having a vocabulary is really, really profoundly important. And
Oh, yeah.
as we both discovered, at some
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. No, I mean it's more just like it's it's the mindset really. It's the keep moving forward mindset.
Yeah.
I'm just always
Yes.
on that move, Yeah.
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 But yeah,
Well,
it
you know
doesn't
what
have
though?
to be a new lick. It could be
I got
anything.
I got to tell you though, I first heard you. I was recently kind of in back in the world, chasing, sounds and stuff. And
Mm,
I remember it was a pedal, a pedal you were famous for relatively early on in your YouTube career.
Okay.
A, a Chula or
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
anyway, you were playing a killing version of I maybe Crosscut Saw, maybe, but something that reminded me of that, and Tone for Days, and just killing, you know. And you weren't playing the same way as you play now,
Oh
but
yeah, I know.
you were killing. You know what I mean? And maybe it wasn't as personal as it is now, but it was really, really, really good. I gotta tell you,
Thanks,
you
Tim.
know, and inspirational. You know, and so all this moving forward thing is also can we move forward? Well, sometimes that moving forward is revisiting and circling back, and
Sure.
you know, it's, it's not necessarily a march in a straight line toward some
No, it's
something.
just it's the path. It's not the
Yeah,
it's the doing it. Yeah,
yeah,
that's most important. It could be you could be, moving whatever. You just have to keep moving, you know.
yeah. That's right.
Yeah,
Keep moving.
yeah, yeah. Well, there you go. Well, dude, we've reached the end of the 10 questions. It's a pleasure as always to pick your brain and to hear more of your story, which is fascinating. There will be links to all things Tim Lerch in the description of this video. Please make sure you go buy his record, buy his True Fire courses, go on his site and download some of his arrangements, and then tag him in Instagram because he loves that. you know,
Yes, yes,
and
yes.
for the
Especially if you do something a little different than I did. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And for the rulers, we'll do the turn two video coming up. If you're not a ruler, you should become a ruler. Hit join, or at least please hit subscribe and support the channel and keep my effort level high on these videos by continuing to watch. Anyways, Tim, dude, thank you for taking the time out of your day. It's always a pleasure to get to talk to you, man.
Thank you, Josh. I had a blast, and you're really good at this. So you're probably good at just about everything you try, but you're good at this, and it was very comfortable, and you elicited from my memory bank some things that I hadn't really thought to think about or wanted to share. So I appreciate it.
Oh,
It's wonderful.
well, thanks, Tim. I appreciate that. And for the rulers, we'll be right back.
All right.